Hello everyone, today we're going to be working on value scales. Value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. Value scales are very, very useful when trying to color an image, whether you're using paint or color pencil or whatever, because it gives you a reference point of being able to match the shades or the tones or the values of an object that you're drawing. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill in this pre-drawn scale. There are 7 equally sized boxes. You can easily just draw this yourself as well. And I have it labeled as one end being the lightest, the other end being the darkest, and I found the middle square and wrote medium on it, just as a reference point for where we're going to be shading. We're going to be doing 2 value scales, one in pencil and then one in colored pencil, just so we can practice seeing if there's any differences in the way we color based on if we use color pencil or pencil. You could do the same exact technique using different mediums if you want to try different things like watercolor, tempera, stuff like that. So I'm going to zoom in so we can see this scale a little bit clearer, and we're going to start with the first one in pencil. Now, when doing your shading, the hardest part of value scales for a lot of people is controlling the pressure of your pencil. So I'm going to show you a few tricks to maybe help you control the pressure of your pencil. It's a skill, just like anything else, that can be learned with practice and repetition. Okay, I'm going to start at the darkest end and work my way from dark to light. The darkest is representing the absolute darkest value that I can get with the material I'm using, which in this case is pencil. So when you're doing this, fill in the square or circle or whatever the shape is as completely and solidly as possible. I'm pushing down as hard as I can. One way to get good pressure is keeping your fingertips closer to the tip of the pencil. That gives you more leverage so you can color in darker. Also, you want to make sure that you are filling this in completely and not scribbling. If you scribble, it's going to be really hard to tell one value from another. Scribbles are just not good examples of that. So I'm working my way from darkest slowly to the lightest. The lightest is going to be completely white. All right, so that's my darkest. Now I'm going to work with the square next to it, and we're still at the end that we would consider dark. This end is all going to be kind of dark, but it is a step away from the darkest. So this time I'm going to fill in the whole square, but I'm just not going to press as hard as I did for the first one. I still want it to be dark. I just don't want to use the same intensity, the same intense pressure that I used for the first one. So I'm going to still make sure it's dark looking, but it's just going to be a little bit less intense. Now, what you want to do at this point, or start doing, is making sure that every square that you complete is different than the one on either side of it. We don't want any 2 squares to be the same. So the best way to do this, which we don't have to do much for it right now, is to look at them side by side or even block the other things around it and really examine, do those 2 tones look different? Do those 2 values look different from each other? In my opinion, they do. This one definitely feels a little bit darker to me, whereas this one feels a little bit lighter. So I'm going to move on to my next one. Same thing, it should still be dark. It just shouldn't be as intensely dark as this one. So I'm going to, again, use my pencil pressure to try to get a tone that's still in the world of darkness, just not as intense as this. Now you'll notice that I'm going up and down one direction, up and down another direction in order to fill in my square. You'll also notice that when I hold my pencil at this point, I'm not holding it too close to the end. When you hold your pencil with your fingers close to it, you tend to use more pressure. You tend to push harder when your fingertips are this close. When your hand is higher up on the pencil barrel, it really forces you to not be able to press as hard because you just don't have the leverage to do it. So this is a good way to kind of try to help yourself not to push as hard. Put your hands higher up on the pencil if you think you're pushing too hard. That can be one strategy. Now I'm going to examine these 2 to see if they look the same or different. They look a little bit different. I think that this is still pretty close to that one though. I think that the similarities are pretty similar. So what I'm going to do is take my eraser and I'm just going to erase a tiny bit of this one that I just did to see if I can lighten it up just a touch. And I'm going to re-examine it and side by side see if they look different. I'm doing this process of covering up everything around it to help not distract me, so that I'm really focused on the two values that I really want to concentrate on. So these do look different to me now. I can double check. These look different. Those look different. I'm going to continue on. Now I'm ready to do the next square. This is the medium. I've labeled it medium. So this really should be a nice middle gray. So we want it to be a perfectly average middle medium tone, just right here in the middle of our value scale. When you're done, again, cover up the squares, see if they look different enough. If they don't look different enough, either darken this one or lighten this one up. I think there is enough variation there that we can move on to the next one. And now I'm getting into the light side. Okay, so now we got to make sure that we're really focusing on lightening up our values, that we're not pushing as hard. Remember, this one's going to just stay white. So I'm really trying to keep my hand even higher up on the pencil, to really force myself to not be able to use as much pressure. And let's examine if they look different enough. I do think there's enough difference there, and let's try to do our last one. Now this one should be in between white and this, so at this point, what I'm doing by the time I get to this square, I'm actually not even using any pressure at all. I'm literally just moving the pencil back and forth. I'm using my hand to help give it leverage so that it'll move back and forth, but I am not putting any pressure down at all. I'm literally just moving my hand back and forth, and that is completely it. And one last time, let's just examine, see if they look different enough. I think they do, and our value scale is completed. If you think you need to do any tweaking, you think you need to layer a little bit more to make something a little bit darker or a little bit lighter than something else, just to give this a little bit more of a difference, then definitely go back in there and do that, so that you can make sure each square in fact looks different from each other, so that when you look at it further away, you should have a nice progression of dark to light. All right, we're going to repeat this process using color pencil. Doesn't matter what color you pick, but it's going to be the same exact thing. Start at the darkest end, push down as hard as you can, and again, this is supposed to represent the absolute darkest value I can get with this particular color. The one thing you should be careful about color pencil is that you cannot erase color pencil completely. The good news is you can erase it a little bit. So if something is too dark, you can use your eraser to lighten it up. So that is the good news, but if you're hoping to get it to be white again, that is not going to happen. So I'm going to finish this whole value scale using color. I'm going to be doing the same exact method as I did for the top one, every so often covering up opposite squares so I can focus on the ones that I'm trying to compare with, and again going from darkest to lightest. Our value scales, I am going to scooch on down to the bottom of this page here, and we're just going to put this to practice a little bit on this cube template. So what we have here is a cube, it's got 3 sides visible, and we're going to try to use our value scale to guide us on where to put our dark, medium, and light values on this cube to give it a more 3-dimensional look. So we're using this sun symbol as a reference point of where the light is hitting. So wherever the light is coming down, that should be the lightest side. Whatever's opposite that should be the darkest side. And then the alternating side would usually be sort of a medium tone. So you can use whatever color you want in order to do this. I'm actually going to practice doing a little color layering just for some experimentation. So what I'll be doing is using 2 colors, layering them on top of each other as I do this. And that's just a personal choice. You can use one solid color, that's totally fine. So the sun is up here. which means that it is shining down onto the roof of this cube. So the very top should be our lightest. Now we don't necessarily really want to go with a white because the cube is a color. It's going to be an orangey yellow color, but we might want to focus more on this type of square over here. So whatever pressure you use to get this light shade here, which again, as you remember me describing, it was really no pressure at all. I was just moving my hand back and forth. You're going to use that same pressure for the top of the cube. So I'm using no pressure at all, just moving the pencil back and forth using the orange. Then to do a color layer, I'm actually going to take another color and I'm going to layer it on top using the same amount of pressure, which again is pretty much no pressure at all. I'm just going back and forth. And now I have my light side. So this is where the sun's hitting. The opposite side is going to be the dark side, whatever's opposite of where the sun is. So this is going to be my darkest. Now I might not want to push quite as hard as the absolute darkest dark because I do have to do a shadow and a cast shadow as well. So I might do more of the one next to it, which is still a pretty good amount of pressure. So I'm going to take my color pencil and I'm going to press down and I'm going to fill in this whole backside using a lot of pressure, just like I did for this end of the value scale with one color. And again, since I'm doing a color layer, I'm going to use a second color using the same amount of pressure again. You, however, do not need to do that. You can just do one color. So now we have a really light side and a really dark side. This side off to the side, because the sun is not directly far away from it or directly on top of it, it's going to be more of a medium tone. So again, going back to your value scale, looking at sort of the mid-tone right there, that is where we want to start with this. So I'm going to be using my color pencil with sort of a medium pressure. I'm going to try to remind myself, or even just look at this as a reference up here to know, okay, I'm trying to get a similar shade, a similar value to that. So I'm going to try to use a pressure where I'm using some pressure, just not as intense as over here. And then doing my second color because I am layering, again, personal choice. And there we go. So I have a visibly light side, medium side, and a dark side. So even just doing that is making my cube look much more three-dimensional. But again, we have the sun shining here. Whenever you have a light source, there is always a cast shadow. So the cast shadow would be on the same side as where the darkest side of my object is. Here's a tip about shading. This is a personal tip that I think generally works very well. Warm color objects generally look good with warm colored shadows. Cool color like blues, purples, and greens generally look better with cooler color shadows. So I tend to use my blacks with the cool colors and deeper dark browns with my warm colors. So what I'm going to do is on the same side of where the darkest color is, I'm going to take my brown or whatever color you've used for shadow. I'm actually going to put a layer of it over the entire color. Shadows don't care what color things are. Shadows exist on top of those colors whether or not they're there. So we're going to put a shadow over the whole side of it first. Next, I'm going to create my cast shadow. Now, cast shadows are always darkest right next to the object, so I'm going to use my brown as a really nice dark tone right next to the edge of the box. I'm going with my darkest, so I'm really pressing hard. And then I'm going to slowly fade it out until it is at the absolute lightest form here, until it fades into white. So I'm going to take this and now I'm going to slowly lessen my pressure, slowly, 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 until I'm not using any pressure whatsoever. I might go over it a second time. It's okay if the edges are fuzzy and not clear. That is how a natural shadow looks. It is very often not perfectly crisp and clean. Sometimes it is, but very often it does kind of fade out into sort of nothingness. Okay, I hope you guys had fun making these value scales and learning a little bit about value with me. Keep practicing the value scales, keep practicing on other three-dimensional objects. Remember, the more you practice this skill, the better you're going to get at it. Have fun.